Why are we all here today? I guess that most of us share the same ambition, the same vision, which is a vision of a thriving landscape, which is this one. A thriving landscape where human activities do not further contribute to the conversion of natural ecosystems, where human activities do not contribute to deforestation, to peatland conversion, to water resources depletion, etc. Further, our shared aspiration is certainly that human activities contribute to the conservation and restoration of these natural ecosystems because they are critical to people's well-being. And well, I assume that most of us in this room are working in this space, either as part of companies that produce the goods that we consume every day, as part of the conservation community, as part of government, and of course, because this is the topic of this conference, as part of the investors community. But we're all here today because there's also one big challenge that we still need to address, which is how can we reach this vision of a thriving landscape without solely relying on public funding. So in other words, how should we structure our jurisdictional approaches? How should we structure our projects so that they attract new sources of investment and that it goes really beyond public funding? So this is what we're working on at IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. We've got a landscape program that we're piloting in 12 landscapes in 8 countries, and we're structuring the program around the 3 pillars of forest protection and restoration, sustainable production of agro-commodities, but also community inclusion, social inclusion. So what does it take to build this approach? Of course, well, when we talk about jurisdictional approaches, it's about working with multiple stakeholders, with governments at a national but also jurisdictional level, with companies, with businesses, so small companies but also the big ones, the traders, the retailers, with communities, farmers, NGOs, and of course the investors community. It's also about working at different scales, at a global scale. And for example, IDH with the World Cocoa Foundation, what we did is that we convened global cocoa companies towards a joint statement of intent for them to eliminate deforestation in their value chain. It requires working at a national level, and we worked with the governments of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire for them to define what is the action plan to reduce deforestation that is related to cocoa production. It requires, of course, to work at the jurisdictional level, but also at a sub-jurisdictional level, at the municipality level. So there's different ingredients to this recipe, so that the jurisdictional approach can attract investors and new sources of funding. And I'm going to tell you about the 3 main ingredients that we've got. The first one is really government engagement. And also government commitments to sustainability targets. So here I'm taking the example of Brazil. So Brazil, at a national level, they've got their NDC that include also deforestation-related targets, so a mitigation of deforestation-related targets. At a provincial level, at a state level, the state of Mato Grosso has committed to very ambitious targets on production, conservation, and inclusion. So they committed to it in 2015. At the municipal level, now we're working with 2 municipalities in Mato Grosso, and they've also adopted some targets on production, conservation, and inclusion. Why is it important? Well, it gives long-term certainty. The fact that at a national level, at a provincial level, at a municipality level, there are sustainability targets, so there's a pathway towards reaching the vision. And it's extremely important to de-risk the investments, to de-risk the landscape. The second ingredient is a supply chain approach. It's about working with the producers on the ground. And in the municipalities of Corte de Iguaçu and Juruena, in the north of Mato Grosso, we're working with the cattle rancher, so São Marcelo Fazendas. But we're also working with the mother company, with also the buyers of the beef and of the byproducts like leather, and also with the retailer. And we're creating this link between the producer and the retailer, because it's critical that you've got, well, a supply of sustainable product, but also commitments from the demand side. So this is the second ingredient. The third ingredient is about, well, what we call developing a production, protection, and inclusion compacts, which are agreements between different stakeholders at a sub-jurisdictional level, agreement on key targets that all of the stakeholders agree upon. And this is actually in the municipalities of Cota de Iguaçu and Juruena. These compacts were recently signed on the 10th of May. And they were signed, and this is what's really interesting, not only by the mayors, but also by representatives from the timber sector, the beef sector, from settlements, so settlement representatives, also from conservation NGOs, and all of them agreed on the set of targets. And here as well, this is important to investors. So there's a shared vision, there's shared targets that will lead to an action plan. So you know that the jurisdictions are on the right path towards sustainability. The next stage is the creation of verified sourcing areas. And it's extremely interesting because when the compacts were signed in Juruena and Cota de Iguaçu, there was really momentum, and people were like, yes, we want to create this jurisdiction where buyers can sustainably source their beef. And this is what the verified sourcing area is about, is creating these certainties that the beef that you buy from this jurisdiction is produced sustainably. Also, the PPI compacts, so the Production, Protection, and Inclusion Compacts, are the first steps towards, well, developing an action plan with different buckets of actions that will need to be developed and that can help attract different sources of investment. So you have the supply chain companies that want to invest in the landscape because they're interested in sourcing sustainable beef. There's also commercial banks that are interested in giving loans to farmers because we're helping the farmers have their car validated. There's also impact investors that are interested and multilateral development banks. So we are able to attract different sources of funding to the landscape. So to summarize, what are the ingredients to our recipe? So it's first government engagement at different levels, national, provincial, and municipality level, which is key. A supply chain approach, connecting the supply to demand, and then creating this production, protection, and inclusion compact. And it really helps create these pipelines of projects that are investable. So this really helps while reaching our vision, which is this thriving landscape that I presented just before, where really human activities are contributing to the protection and the conservation of forests. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have during one of the breaks later today. Thank you.